Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us today on the latest instalment of our live broadcasts. Delighted to welcome Nick Scott, Chief Finance Officer of Baird Group. Good afternoon, Nick.
Afternoon, Paul. How are you doing? All right?
Yeah, smashing. Thanks. How are you?
Yeah, good. Thank you. Very good.
And decided to work from the home office for today's broadcast?
Oh no. Well, this morning started in Leeds, so early start this morning, and then back up the A19 this afternoon. So yeah.
And were you in the gym before Leeds? I know you're often in the gym before work.
Yeah. Only way to start the day.
Always an early start from the northeast to get down to Leeds. I like the Hartlepool United shirt in the normal background, Nick. But no, thanks for joining us from home, and really pleased to have you with us today. Just for those of you that may not know Nick and who he is and his incredible achievements to date, Nick is a multi-award winning CFO. In 2021, Nick won Yorkshire CFO of the Year. Was actually nominated for Resilient CFO of the Year, but actually won the esteemed overall prize, which was a shock to him and his colleagues at that awards dinner, which was gratefully received. And then last year in 2022, Nick won the Northern Turnaround CFO of the Year for his work pre and post-pandemic with the Baird Group. For those of you that may not know Baird, Baird is now a £100 million group, pivoted significantly during the pandemic period, and Nick will share his actions and his insights and his learnings from that period. Great story to see and to hear. They now have over 60 UK stores. They have an e-commerce business that is growing 200% year on year, which is now the second fastest men's clothing online retailer, and a wholesale business that is doubling year on year. So fantastic achievements, and we'll dive straight into hearing about those from Nick this afternoon. So thanks to those of you who are joining us online. If you do have any questions, feel free to put those in the chat box and we'll do our best to answer those as we progress the conversation. We've had a couple of conversations come in already, so thanks to those people that submitted questions early. Nick will be fielding those. But Nick, perhaps you can start by telling us what led you into the world of accounting and finance.
Yeah, sure. Going back many years now to all the way back to school, really, where I wasn't an academic by any scale at all. In fact, I struggled quite a lot at school in the classroom, learning subjects that I couldn't apply to my everyday. If it was something that was practical that I could apply, absolutely great. But something that I couldn't really grasp and understand and apply, I really struggled. Mm-hmm. And after school, I didn't really fancy continuing what would be deemed the normal route into A levels, and therefore I did what was back then a BTEC national diploma in business and finance. And as the name suggests, it was a business studies qualification. And within that, there was a fair few modules that absolutely focused on finance. And that was my first real introduction into the world of finance.
Yeah. And how did you progress from there in terms of qualifications, Nick?
Yeah, so from doing that, what I really liked was the fact that in industry within finance, you really could get involved with every aspect of the business. Other disciplines, you were sort of stuck in that particular subject. So, if you wanted to go and work in insurance, it was with insurance, and that was just one aspect of a business. Or, if you wanted to go and work in buying or procurement, you were stuck into that one area of that business. Whereas with finance, you could get stuck into buying, you could get stuck into manufacturing, sales. Your tentacles went into all aspects of the business. And that's really why I chose to get involved in finance, and specifically into industry, and not choose the route which was through practice.
Yeah. And certainly the role of a CFO absolutely touches on all those parts of the business. So, hopefully you're still enjoying that journey. Talk us through your career path to date then, Nick. Where did you start and how did you get to where you are today?
Yeah, so straight after finishing that course at college, again, I didn't want to continue into the world of doing a degree, which, the majority of the people that I knew at that time, that was just the standard route. So I actually started working at the age of 18, and it was a youth training apprenticeship scheme where I earned the massive sum of £35 a week, plus my bus fare if I
What's
give
your bus
receipt.
fare? Yeah, don't forget about
Absolutely,
that.
absolutely. And I worked in many different local businesses, starting in purchase ledger and sales ledger, and getting a really, really good grounding in the basics of a finance, whilst also studying AAT.
Yeah.
So I was studying AAT, and because I was learning what I was doing at work in my day-to-day life, I found it, much more straightforward to go to college, learn my AAT, and apply that to my work.
Yeah.
And very, very quickly progressed all the way through AAT, and then just took the natural step to continue my studies and do SEMA. Whilst I was studying SEMA, I really got my first real role as an assistant management accountant at a firm up in Hartlepool, which did all of the electronic component parts for the Black and Decker products. And I was qualified in SEMA by the age of 23.
Yeah, good achievement.
And at that point in time, I wasn't much different to anyone else. The other guys and girls that were qualifying at the same time were slightly older than me, and had tens of thousands of pounds of debt from university, and nowhere near the level of experience that I'd gained while they were having an amazing time at uni. So yeah, absolutely felt as though I missed out on university and all of the fun that went with that. But from a career perspective, I had lots of attributes that they didn't have. One of them being, the amount of experience that I had.
Yeah.
And then once I passed my SEMA qualification, then it was just full steam in terms of focusing on my career. And I stayed pretty local. I got a great role with Tetley Tea, which is based in Eaglescliffe in the northeast.
Yeah.
Started there as a factory accountant, and progressed through that organisation, getting bigger roles and more responsibility into the supply chain and procurement, and had a great time working for Tetley.
I think, if I remember rightly, Nick, that was the first time we met each other. I
Yeah,
recruited a capital accountant for you when you were a financial controller, and as you rightly said, one of the things that struck me, I expected to be meeting an older financial controller, should we say? And when I walked in and was pleasantly surprised that we had a few less grey hairs in the beard back in those days, mate. But you achieved financial controller stage at pretty young age.
yeah, I did, and I think that from a very young age, I always wanted to progress. I was always ambitious. I always wanted that bigger role and the bigger car that came with it. And that was pretty much the reason why I left Tetley and moved on to Bulmers Transport, again based in Middlesbrough. And I joined there as financial controller, but within a few months became finance director, and kicked on from there through Bulmers. And I think that when you look back in your career, you have some great learnings, and at Bulmers I got one of those great learnings. It was something which it wasn't pleasant at the time, because it was 2008, 2009 when the credit crunch hit, and the business was highly leveraged, with lots of borrowing, and overnight, when all of the troubles started with the Newcastle, I think Newcastle Building Society,
Northern Rock, yeah.
Northern Rock, yeah, and cash just disappeared overnight, and credit and funding. The banks, that good old saying of the banks will give you an umbrella, but when it starts raining, they'll want it back. And that was very true in terms of what happened when I was at Bulmers. And for a number of months, we went through different strategies for the business, and ultimately we had to do a pre-pack administration, which it was very, very painful for the business, for the creditors, for the employees. But the process gave life to the business, and it gave all those creditors the opportunity to earn profits and get the cash back on the other side of it. And like I said, it was not a great experience at the time, but looking back, it gave me something that, a proper battle scar that, it's armed me for future events. And I stayed with that business for another year, got that business set, and then moved on to a bigger finance director role down in Vion, which did more manufacturing back in food for pork in terms of the gammon and bacon. And I worked there for a couple of years, and again looking for that next role, and got headhunted for a role at the Irish Dairy Board, and that was based over in Cheshire. And that gave me another fantastic experience in food, and we built that business, and probably talk about that in a bit more detail later on. But we changed that business quite a lot and took it from about 300 million to over 500 million turnover. And then I joined Asda and one of their subsidiaries, International Procurement and Logistics, which had a dizzying turnover of £1 billion. And it's, I look back at that particular time of my career and having a massive impact on the business, but in reality, it didn't have a big impact in the business. So we were saving millions of pounds, but not really changing or having a big impact on the business. And for me, that was a bit of a learning in terms of, my sweet spot in terms of businesses are under £500 million, because that's where I can make the biggest impact that is truly felt in the organisation. And then from there, joined Baird Group 5 years ago, and been CFO and Chief Operating Officer here ever since.
Yeah. And what contributed to taking the roles that you've taken along that career journey then, Nick?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the decision to leave businesses, I do get bored really, really quickly. I've got a very short attention span. And I think that, every day is a school day. Every single day that I get up and go to work or on a weekend, I always try and learn something. And without a shadow of a doubt, in every organisation that I've worked, I've learned an incredible amount. And at the same time as learning, I've always added a significant amount of value. But there does become a point in time where the learning from the organisation and the value that you can add to that organisation starts to decline. And it's at that point in time when you need to start sitting back and thinking, in my opinion, I'm just starting to spin the wheels and keep the business going, but I'm struggling to really add any huge value. And when I'm adding big value or doing interesting projects, and that's when my attention starts to wane, and I start thinking about making the next move, really.
And if there's any business owners out there looking to employ a CFO, maybe this is a useful question for them, Nick. What is it you look for when making those career decisions?
Consistently all the way through my career, I think I've always applied the same three aspects when I'm looking for a new role, or when a headhunter picks up the phone to me and outlines a role. These three aspects are always true for me. And the first one is, I'm not precious about the size of the business, and I think that in finance we always talk about the level of turnover of the business, so whether it's 100 million, 500 million, a billion, the actual real size of turnover of the business, that's not important to me. But what is important to me is that business has real relevance in the market in which it operates, and it has a real place in the industry in which it operates. So that's the first thing that is a must-have for me. The second important aspect for me is that the role that I go into, it has to have a clear purpose. There has to be a real level of ambition that I can add when I'm going into that business. I would never join an organisation where, it was really stable, profits were massive, everything was going good, and it was just a case of doing the same thing. For me, I wouldn't be interested in that. I'd want to join an organisation whereby, it wanted to double its top line and, quadruple its bottom line and add real value to an organisation. So that's the second aspect that's always important to me. Um, and then the third piece is it's all about the product and what the company actually does. I spent well over 15 years working in the food and drink industry, and that's because I'm a foodie. And my wife's a foodie, and we love our food and drink. And I seem to have worked in tea and wine and spirits at Asda, and dairy products and meat. So I've really enjoyed that part of it. And at Baird Group, we do men's formal wear, and not that I'm huge in terms of fashion, but I have a real interest and think that I can actually add value to the organisation through my interest in the product. And they're the three things that are really important to me when I'm looking for a new role.
Yeah, so just to recap, I suppose the positioning of that organisation within the market space, their ambition and desire to grow, and for you, are you interested in the product? And got to be something that's of interest to get you out of bed in the morning.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Good stuff. And what was key in propelling you then, Nick, from finance director to CFO level? What's the difference there?
Yeah, I think there's probably a couple of points around that. I think that a lot of it is about time served experience. I started work at 18 and gained lots and lots of experience over that period of time. And a few battle scars along the way as well. I mentioned earlier about Bulmers and the pre-pack administration, and it's not something that I would want to go through again. But that scar and the experience has certainly armed me to be more resilient. We spoke about one of my awards that I was put forward for in terms of being resilient, and people have said, "Oh, it must be really, stressful to go through that experience." Well, not really, because you put a plan in place and stick to that plan and drive through with a few different options along the way. So I think that moving from being an FD into CFO, there is a lot about being time served, and also confidence as well. The more time that I've gone through my career, I've just become more confident in who I am. I think that certainly in the early parts of my career, there was this view that if you hadn't gone to university and if you hadn't qualified with one of the big four practices, that you are, looked upon as, not suitable. So many different roles that came past my way was, you have to be from the, qualified with one of the big four, and I just hadn't, and I think that's starting to change now. And I think that's important because people learn in different ways. So I think that element of it, time served, experience, and then putting those together, a CFO needs to have that real skill of being able to set the strategy of the business and create an environment where all of the employees in the business can be the best version of themselves, whilst also being able to dip down right into the detail, but at the right time. And you can't really teach that. That just comes in time and with experience, and have the confidence to do it.
Yeah. Nick, we had a question come in from Sarah, and I think this is a good time to ask this question. So a bit of a curveball for you, but in your opinion then, what are the key differences between an FD and a CFO? And what is it that's going to make the difference in skills between an FD and a CFO?
Yeah, okay. I think that sometimes it's just a different job title. So an FD in one organisation could be the CFO in a different one, because just the pure size of an organisation. So not every organisation has a CFO. It'll have a managing director and a finance director, and that finance director in that organisation may assume all of the responsibilities of a CFO. So I think sometimes it's just a job title as opposed to the different aspects of it. But I think that on a day-to-day basis, the FD is truly focused on finance and being in the detail with the finance team, whereas the CFO has to step above that and take a higher level view of the overall organisation,
Yeah.
and not just focus on finance, but truly understand the market in which they operate in, truly understand the customer, so that you can challenge the broader organisation.
Yeah.
So the difference, it's slight, but it's just a wider view of the business, I
Yeah.
think.
And how did you gain those skills to enable you to make that change?
I just think it's time served, getting that experience, and then the confidence to really take all those learnings and challenge the wider organisation.
Yeah, and I think knowing you, it's your ambition to get out there and get under the skin of every aspect of the business. You already touched on that was one of the things that led you into a career in finance, not just being a numbers person, but being aware of the overall strategy of the business and your desire to get out there and really get under the skin of every single department.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't try not to sit behind my laptop much during the day, but to get out into the business. I do visit our stores a significant amount of time. I get out to the distribution centre a lot, so I'm not always sat behind my laptop in head office, because you can't run a business. Well, you can run some businesses from behind a laptop, but I don't feel as though we could run this particular business from a laptop. It's a people business.
Yeah.
So get out there and work with the people for sure.
Yeah, and I seem to remember an incident where we had some high winds a few years ago, and those high windows at the Hartlepool distribution centre were cracked, and you were the first person on the site with the keys and sweeping up the glass.
Yeah, absolutely. Storm Arwen, that came just over a year ago, and some high level glass windows came in, and I probably wasn't quite the first on site. I think our manager beat us to it, but yeah, I was in there all weekend with a shovel and those excellent gloves that stop you from getting cut with the glass. But yeah, we were there, we were on site, and we all worked together, and it doesn't really matter what level you are. It's about pitching in and rolling your sleeves up sometimes and getting stuck in. But yeah, absolutely.
Super stuff. What would you say have been the two biggest highlights or achievements then of your career so far, Nick?
Yeah, there's two that stand out. About 10 years ago, I worked for the Irish Dairy Board, and I worked for their UK subsidiary, which is all about providing a route into the UK market for Irish cheese and butter. But at that time, there was also a huge campaign for Buy British, of which Irish cheese wasn't. And at that point in time, this business was the main provider into Tesco, doing all of their own label cheese, and therefore we had a requirement for large amounts of British cheese. And again, when I was there as a CFO, looking at the market, looking at what competitors were, looking at who potential suppliers were, it seemed to make sense that there was a business called First Milk, that plugging First Milk and the Irish Dairy Board together, as the business, we'd have a great supply of British cheese coming through from them, and potentially their commercial business would open up opportunities for more Irish cheddar and butter sales. And to cut a really, really long story short, I initiated a conversation with First Milk. We built a proposal to do a joint venture, but due to a few dynamic moving parts at the time, that changed, and the business that I worked for ended up buying their commercial facing business, but in return gave First Milk a huge long-term supply agreement, and that particular transaction, because of the size of the supply, it was billions of pounds in terms of the transaction value, and a 10-year tenure, and that pretty much at that point in time was like the pinnacle of my career, and that helped drive that business's turnover from just under 400 million to over 500 million at the time, and then latterly the last 5 years I've been with Baird Group. The business structure when I joined was that Baird Group were in all of the concessions for Debenhams and House of Fraser. And unfortunately, the writing was on the wall that department stores were probably not going to last through the changing view and scope of the high streets and the way that shoppers wanted to interact. And therefore, I had to put a plan in place with the management team at Baird Group about changing the business model. And we were working through that up to the point of COVID, at which point Debenhams, our biggest customer at the time, went into administration. And, everyone, not just me, but everyone in the world there, apart from essential workers, were stuck at home working like we are now, behind a computer screen, with a lot of uncertainty about what the future held. And myself and the chief exec, we decided that unfortunately we needed to do some financial restructuring of our own to protect our business, now that Debenhams had gone into administration, and we launched a CVA through the times of COVID, and that accelerated the change in our business model, and Baird Group came out of COVID a significantly stronger business than what it entered. And if you look at the business model from 5 years ago, where it was in probably just shy of 200 different concessions on very small square footages, we're now in over 60 stores. The Suit Direct brand that we operate under in the UK is doing extremely well. We're driving the e-commerce site, and as you said, the second fastest growing website, just behind Boohoo. So, very proud of what the business has achieved over the last 5 years. And yeah, it's those are the two big highlights of my career so far. Hopefully, there's a few more still to come.
More to come, absolutely. And we always say, don't we, hindsight's a wonderful thing, and looking back, has there been a sliding doors moment when, with the benefit of hindsight, perhaps you would have taken advantage of and benefited from staying in a role or a company longer than perhaps you have?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I just don't think so, unfortunately.
Okay.
I think that, I've always thought that looking back and wanting to do something different, it's impossible anyway, because you can't undo decisions that you've made throughout your career. And if I look at where I am right now, I'm really, really happy with where I am. And if along the way I had made a different decision, then maybe I wouldn't be where I am today. And therefore I'd be quite disappointed not to be where I am. So yeah, I've got no regrets of any of the decisions that I've made. I've always thought long and hard about, when I want to leave a business and where I'm going to go. So yeah, unfortunately, definitely no sliding door moments.
No, good to hear. But I suppose then, looking back again, what advice would you give to your younger self, or anybody who might be listening today that's still on that very much aggressive early career journey? What advice would you give to your younger self?
For me personally, it would be respond, don't react. There's been many instances throughout my career where I've reacted to a particular situation, and reacting sometimes gets a different response to what you really wanted. So definitely respond, don't react. But I would say, be true to who you are, be true to yourself. You can look around you, and like I was saying earlier, people think that you should go to university and you should get a degree, and that's the way to do it, and then you should join a big four firm and you should qualify, and that'll open all of the doors. But that won't work for everybody, and therefore I don't feel as though that you need to be a square peg in a round hole. You need to be true to yourself and play to your strengths. And understand what your weaknesses are, and then make sure that you put plans in place to protect yourself and the business from the weaknesses that you have. I definitely know what my weaknesses are. I'm sure that the people that I've worked with probably think I've got a lot more as well. But yeah, I just think being true to yourself, absolutely.
Yeah, good stuff. And have you taken that? So people that might not know Nick on a social level, he's actually a manager of an under nines now. Is it under tens football
Oh,
team?
under 11s.
Under
Time for
11s. Wow,
now, yeah.
they've grown. And do you take that respond, don't react on the sidelines with you?
Yeah, definitely. Every football game that the boys play, I want them to win. But
Yeah.
the most important thing is that they enjoy themselves.
Yeah.
And when I started, I used to be that shouty manager, but now I'm much more calm on the sidelines and
Responding, not reacting.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
One final question, Nick. We've had another one come in. This is from Ashley, and it's really about starting a new role. And do you have a couple of questions here? Do you have a blueprint for the first few weeks or months? And how do you know what to focus on in what order so you can determine where you can add value quickly?
Yeah, that is a really good question. To have a blueprint, yeah, sort of. I think that every time I start a new role, the most important element is the people, the people that are already in the organisation, because you're new to them. You'll have a different management style to whoever you took over from, or if it's a new role. So getting to know the people in the business is really, really important. And when I say getting to know them, I mean properly. What level of ambition do they have? What do they enjoy about the role? What do they find frustrating? And what motivates them? I'd say the second thing is starting to learn about the business, the market, the customers, what makes the business tick, and then understanding the processes as well. So they're the sort of the three things that I really focus on when I join an organisation, and it's from learning those three things that then I can start prioritising what it is that I'm actually going to do and how I can add the most value. Every organisation is different, and each time you do it, the answer will be slightly different, and the requirements will be slightly different. So, yeah.
Yes. So understand the people, understand the business in its wider context, and understand the processes.
Yeah.
And then you can determine where you can add the most value most quickly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Super stuff. Great. Well, on that note, Nick, as we're just slightly over our half an hour, thank you so much for joining us. It's wonderful to have you on. Great to hear the benefits of your esteemed career today, and long may it continue. I'm certain it will. So to those of you who joined us today, hope you take something away from Nick's valuable career and insights. Nick, once again, thanks for joining us. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for being so open and honest.
No problem. Thanks very much for having me.
And if anybody would like, to reach out for any further support or any, anecdotal help, advice from Nick or from Paul Card Recruitment, please feel free to do so. We'll pop our contact details up on screen shortly, but we'll see you very soon. Thanks, Nick.
Thanks.